Chester Bennington was halfway through One Step Closer when he saw something in the crowd that made his blood run cold. Not the usual mosh pit chaos or enthusiastic crowd surfing. Something darker, something that reminded him of every bully he'd ever faced, every predator who had made him feel powerless as a child. A large man in the front section was systematically terrorizing everyone around him, and security wasn't doing anything about it. What Chester did next would either end his career or prove that some battles are worth fighting no matter the cost. But what happened in those next 10 minutes didn't just stop a concert. It changed how the entire music industry handles crowd safety forever. And when the full story came out years later, it revealed that Chester Bennington's greatest performance had nothing to do with singing. It had everything to do with courage. It was July 18th, 2015, at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. Linkin Park was headlining their Hunting Party tour, and the venue was packed with 20,000 passionate fans. The energy was electric, the way it always was when Linkin Park took the stage in their home city. Chester was in peak form that night, his voice powerful and clear, the band tight and energetic. But about 30 minutes into the set, during their third song, Chester noticed something troubling happening in the general admission section, about 50 feet from the stage. A massive man, probably 6'4" and well over 250 pounds, was using his size to intimidate and harass other concertgoers. Chester first spotted him shoving a teenage girl who had been singing along enthusiastically. "Move, bitch," the man screamed at her, loud enough that Chester could hear it over the music. "This is my spot." The girl, who couldn't have been more than 16, looked terrified. She tried to move away, but the crowd was packed so tightly that there was nowhere to go. The large man continued yelling at her, getting increasingly aggressive, using language so foul and threatening that people around him were starting to back away. Chester's first instinct was to keep performing and let security handle it. That's what every artist is trained to do. You don't get involved with crowd problems. You don't break character. You let the professionals deal with it while you focus on the show. But as Chester continued singing, he kept watching the situation unfold. The man wasn't just verbally abusive, he started getting physical. Chester watched in horror as the man deliberately stepped on the feet of people around him, accidentally elbowed a young man in the ribs, hard enough to double him over, and continued his campaign of intimidation against anyone who looked like they might be enjoying themselves. What made it worse was that security seemed oblivious. The incident was happening in a section where the security guards couldn't see clearly because of the angle and the crowd density. From their perspective, everything looked normal, but from Chester's elevated position on stage, he could see exactly what was happening. "This guy is ruining everyone's night," Chester thought as he finished the verse of One Step Closer. "These people paid good money to see us perform, and this asshole is making them miserable." But it was what happened next that pushed Chester over the edge. The large man turned his attention to a young couple who were clearly on a date. They were holding hands and singing along to the music, completely absorbed in the experience. The man walked up to them and started making crude comments about the girl, loud enough for everyone around to hear. "Hey, sweetheart," he leered, "why don't you ditch this loser and come with a real man?" The boyfriend tried to intervene, politely asking the man to leave his girlfriend alone. The response was immediate and violent. The large man shoved the boyfriend hard enough to send him stumbling backward into other people. When the girlfriend tried to help, the man grabbed her arm. "Let go of me," she screamed, trying to pull away. That's when Chester stopped singing. He just stopped, mid-word, mid-song. The band kept playing for a few more bars before they realized what was happening. 20,000 people gradually went quiet as they noticed their lead singer standing motionless at the microphone, staring intently into the crowd. Chester walked to the edge of the stage and pointed directly at the large man, who was still holding the young woman's arm. "Hey," Chester's voice boomed through the sound system, carrying across the entire amphitheater. "Big guy in the black shirt. Yeah, you. Let go of her right now." The crowd turned to look where Chester was pointing. The large man looked up at the stage, surprised to suddenly be the center of attention. For a moment, he seemed unsure of what to do. Then his face twisted into a sneer. "Mind your own business, rock star," he yelled back. "This doesn't concern you." Chester's expression hardened. This was the moment that would define everything that happened next. He could back down, let security handle it, get back to the show. Or he could do what every instinct in his body was telling him to do, stand up to the bully. "Actually, it does concern me," Chester said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of steel. "These are my fans, this is my show, and you're done ruining it for everyone else." The amphitheater was dead silent now, 20,000 people holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The large man finally released the young woman's arm, but his aggressive posture made it clear this wasn't over. "What are you going to do about it?" he challenged, spreading his arms wide. "You want to come down here and make me?" Chester smiled, not a friendly smile, the kind of smile that comes from someone who has faced down bullies before and isn't intimidated by them anymore. "I don't need to come down there," Chester said, "because right now, you've got 20,000 people staring at you. 20,000 people who can see exactly what kind of person you are. 20,000 people who think you're a piece of garbage." The crowd erupted. not in cheers but in boos. 20,000 voices joined together in expressing their disapproval of this man's behavior. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, a wall of judgment that seemed to physically push against him. But Chester wasn't done. Security is on their way to you right now, he continued, and when they get there, you've got two choices. You can leave quietly and maybe salvage what's left of your dignity, or you can keep being the pathetic bully that you are, and 20,000 people are going to watch you get dragged out of here like the coward you really are. The large man looked around at the faces surrounding him, where moments before people had been intimidated by his size and aggression. Now they were angry. The crowd dynamic had completely shifted. He was no longer the predator, he was the prey, but instead of backing down, his anger flared. You think you're tough up there with your microphone and your security? He screamed. Come down here and face me like a man. That's when Chester did something that shocked everyone in the venue. He started walking toward the edge of the stage like he was actually going to jump down into the crowd. Chester, no. Mike Shinoda called out, moving to stop him, but Chester held up a hand. It's okay, Chester said into the microphone. I'm not going anywhere, but I want this guy to see something. Chester pulled off his shirt, revealing the tattoos that covered his arms and torso. Many of them were tributes to overcoming pain, surviving abuse, and finding strength in dark times. But what people in the crowd could see clearly were the scars, old scars from childhood abuse, recent scars from his ongoing struggles with depression and self-harm, the physical evidence of a man who had been broken but had chosen to keep fighting. You want to know who you're challenging? Chester said, his voice now carrying an intensity that made the entire amphitheater feel like a confessional. I'm someone who survived things that would have destroyed most people. I'm someone who has faced real monsters, not playground bullies like you. And I'm someone who refuses to watch innocent people get hurt when I have the power to stop it. The large man's bravado started to crack. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. He'd thought he was picking a fight with a pampered rock star. Instead, he was facing someone who had clearly been through hell and come out the other side stronger. Security had finally located him and was pushing through the crowd, but before they could reach him, something unexpected happened. The people around him started speaking up. I saw you grab that girl, said an older woman standing nearby. That's assault. You hurt my friend, added a young man, pointing to the boyfriend who was still holding his ribs where he'd been elbowed. You've been terrorizing people all night, said another concert goer. We've all been watching you. Suddenly, what had started as one bully intimidating isolated victims became one bully surrounded by a community of people willing to speak truth to power. Chester's intervention had given everyone permission to stop being afraid and start standing up for each other. When security finally reached the man, they found a crowd of witnesses ready to testify about his behavior. Multiple people had video footage of his assaults on their phones. What should have been a simple ejection became a criminal matter. But Chester wasn't finished with his lesson. Before security takes you away, Chester said, addressing the man directly, I want you to look around at all these faces. Really look at them. These are good people who came here to enjoy music and connect with each other. You tried to steal that from them. You tried to make them afraid. But here's what you need to understand. Bullies only have power when good people stay silent. Tonight we're not staying silent. The man was escorted out to a chorus of boos and chants of don't come back. But Chester still wasn't ready to resume the show. I need to say something, he announced to the crowd. What just happened here is about all of us deciding that we won't tolerate people who try to hurt others. Every person in this venue has the power to make someone else's day better or worse. You can choose to help, or you can choose to hurt. But if you choose to hurt people, if you choose to be a predator, if you choose to make others afraid, then you're going to have to deal with people like me, and there are more people like me than you think. Chester paused, letting his words sink in. People who have survived abuse, survived trauma, survived being victimized, and we're not going to let it happen to others. Not on our watch. The applause wasn't just appreciation for a speech. It was recognition of a moment when someone with a platform used it to stand up for the powerless. The story doesn't end with the bully being removed. What happened after the concert was equally important. The young couple who'd been targeted sought out Chester after the show. Through tears, Sarah told him she'd been a domestic violence victim, and Chester's intervention reminded her she didn't have to accept abuse from anyone. When you stood up for me, she said, it wasn't just about that moment. It reminded me that I'm worth protecting, that I deserve to feel safe. David, her boyfriend, added, Sarah has PTSD from her ex. When that man grabbed her arm, I could see her shutting down, going into survival mode. But when you intervened, when you made it clear his behavior was unacceptable, it broke the spell. Chester spent an hour talking to fans who'd witnessed the incident. Many shared stories of being bullied, abused, or intimidated. Several said seeing Chester confront the aggressor gave them courage to speak up about their own experiences. But perhaps the most powerful conversation was with 16-year-old Amy. I was sexually assaulted at a concert last year, Amy told Chester. A guy grabbed me, and no one did anything. Everyone pretended they didn't see it. When I saw you stop the whole show to protect those people, it made me feel like maybe someone would have protected me too. Chester's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm sorry no one was there to help. But you're here now and you're strong and you survived something terrible. That takes courage. Amy smiled through her tears. Your music helped me get through it. Tonight, seeing you stand up to someone like that, it feels like the healing process is complete. Chester hugged her, understanding that his decision to confront the bully had rippled far beyond that one incident. The young couple who had been targeted sought out Chester after the show. Through tears, the young woman told him that she had been the victim of domestic violence in a previous relationship, and that Chester's intervention had reminded her that she didn't have to accept abuse from anyone. When you stood up for me, she said, it wasn't just about that moment. It reminded me that I'm worth protecting, that I deserve to feel safe. Her boyfriend, whose name was David, added context that made the incident even more significant. Sarah has PTSD from her ex-boyfriend, he explained. He used to grab her and intimidate her just like that guy was doing. When it started happening again tonight, I could see her shutting down, going into survival mode. But when you intervened, when you made it clear that his behavior was unacceptable, it broke the spell. Sarah nodded, wiping away tears. For a second, when that man grabbed my arm, I was back in my old apartment with Marcus screaming at me and pushing me around. I felt helpless again. But then you spoke up and suddenly I wasn't alone anymore. Suddenly there was someone with power who was willing to use it to protect me. Chester listened intently, understanding more deeply why his intervention had been necessary. How long have you been together? He asked David. 8 months, David replied. Sarah was afraid to go to concerts because of what happened with her ex. This was her first show since everything went bad. I was so worried that something like this would happen and set back her healing. But it didn't set it back, Sarah interjected. It actually helped. Seeing someone like you refuse to let a bully operate, seeing all those people in the crowd speak up once you gave them permission, it reminded me that most people are good, that there are people who will stand up for what's right. Chester spent the next hour talking to Sarah and David about trauma, recovery, and the long process of healing from abuse. He shared his own experiences with being victimized as a child and how learning to stand up to bullies had been part of his own healing journey. The thing about bullies, Chester told them, is that they count on everyone else being too scared or too polite to call them out. They rely on the fact that most people don't want to cause a scene, but sometimes causing a scene is exactly what you need to do. But perhaps the most powerful conversation Chester had that night was with a 16-year-old girl named Amy, who had been standing near the incident when it occurred. I was sexually assaulted at a concert last year, Amy told Chester, her voice barely above a whisper. A guy grabbed me and touched me inappropriately, and when I tried to get help, people told me I was overreacting. Everyone just pretended they didn't see it happen. Chester's expression darkened. I'm so sorry that happened to you. That should never happen to anyone, especially not at a place where you're supposed to feel safe and have fun. Amy continued, gaining strength in her voice. After that, I stopped going to shows. I stopped listening to music for months. I felt like maybe I had done something wrong. Maybe I had invited it somehow. But watching you tonight, seeing you stop everything to protect people you didn't even know, it made me realize that what happened to me wasn't my fault. It absolutely wasn't your fault, Chester said firmly, and the people who told you that you were overreacting were wrong. You deserve to be protected. You deserve to have someone stand up for you. Amy smiled through her tears. Your music helped me get through the worst of it. Heavy became my anthem because it talked about carrying burdens that weren't mine to carry. And tonight, seeing you in person stand up to someone like that bully, it feels like a circle closing, like I'm finally ready to start enjoying music again. Chester hugged Amy, and in that moment he understood that his decision to confront the aggressive fan had rippled out far beyond just that one incident. It had become a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of aggression. The conversation with Amy led to Chester learning more about the broader issue of safety at concerts, particularly for young women. Amy introduced him to several of her friends who had similar experiences at different venues: unwanted touching, aggressive behavior, harassment that went unaddressed by security or other concert goers. It happens more than people think, explained Jessica, one of Amy's friends. There's this culture where people think that because it's a concert, because everyone's drinking and the energy is high, that certain behavior is just part of the experience, but it's not. It's assault, and it's wrong. Working with the Hollywood Bowl management, Chester helped develop the Safe Space Protocol. This included training security staff and creating designated safe areas. Chester's most innovative contribution was the Community Watch program, training volunteers from the fan community to intervene when witnessing harassment. Chester understood that safer spaces required empowering the community itself, said Maria Rodriguez, the venue's security director. The video became a case study in crisis management. Dr. Michael Thompson analyzed how Chester shifted power from the aggressor to the community, making unacceptable behavior visible while giving everyone permission to speak up. The ripple effects of the Hollywood Bowl incident continued for months. Other artists began sharing their own stories of dealing with problematic audience members and implementing similar interventions. Venues across the country started adopting versions of Chester's Safe Space Protocol. But perhaps the most significant long-term impact was on Chester himself. Friends and family noticed a change in him after the incident, not just confidence but a sense of purpose that went beyond music. Chester had always been passionate about protecting people, observed his close friend Ryan Shuck, but after that night at the Hollywood Bowl, it became like a mission for him. He started seeing his platform differently, understanding that he could use his influence to create real change in how people treated each other. This sense of mission influenced Chester's approach to all subsequent performances. He incorporated messages about respect and community, worked with venues on safety protocols, and used social media to amplify conversations about consent and bystander intervention. The incident deepened Chester's relationship with his trauma history. Speaking with assault survivors reminded him of his childhood abuse and how powerless he'd felt when adults failed to protect him. Standing up to that bully was also about honoring the kid I used to be, Chester reflected. Every time I see someone being hurt and I have power to intervene, I'm also intervening for my younger self. Chester's bandmates initially worried about professional repercussions, but the response was overwhelmingly positive. Eddie Vedder called personally, "You showed us that sometimes you have to risk the show to protect people." The incident became a bonding experience for Linkin Park. Chester wasn't just a great singer that night, Mike Shinoda reflected. He was a leader willing to use his influence for good. In the months following the Hollywood Bowl confrontation, Chester received thousands of messages from fans thanking him for creating a culture where people felt safe to enjoy music without fear of harassment or assault. But more importantly, many fans shared stories of being inspired by Chester's example to speak up in their own lives when they witnessed injustice or aggression. A college student wrote, "After seeing your video, I found courage to report my abusive roommate. For months, I'd watched him intimidate other students but was too scared to speak up. Your example showed me that staying silent makes you complicit." A mother shared, "My daughter was being bullied at school. After showing her your concert video, she found courage to speak up to a teacher. The bullying stopped within a week." These stories reinforced that the incident had been about modeling the world Chester wanted to live in and inspiring others to create it. The video went viral, sparking stand-up speak-out movement. Music venues implemented new policies. The Chester Bennington Protocol became industry standard. If artists stop shows for safety, security responds immediately. Dr. Sarah Martinez analyzed the incident. Chester used his authority to reframe the situation, making unacceptable behavior visible while giving everyone permission to speak up. For Chester, who'd felt powerless against childhood bullies and abusers, the incident was profoundly healing. "I was reclaiming something taken from me as a kid," he reflected. "That powerlessness stayed with me, but that night I had power to stop someone hurting others, and I used it." Other artists praised Chester's courage. Eddie Vedder called personally, "You showed us that sometimes you have to risk the show to protect people." The incident strengthened Chester's relationship with bandmates. Chester wasn't just a great singer that night, Mike Shinoda reflected. He was a leader willing to use his influence for good. Chester received thousands of messages from fans thanking him for creating safer spaces. The teenage girl he'd protected reached out months later. "That night changed everything. You showed me I don't have to accept being treated badly by anyone. I'm not the scared girl I used to be." When Chester died 2 years later, Sarah was among thousands sharing tributes. "Chester Bennington saved me twice," she wrote. "Once from a bully, and once from believing I wasn't worth protecting." Today, the Chester Bennington Foundation includes bystander intervention training, working with venues and artists to create safer spaces for everyone. The foundation's motto, inspired by that night, "Use your voice for those who can't use theirs." Chester's confrontation lasted 10 minutes, but its impact continues rippling outward, creating safer spaces and empowering people to stand up for each other. Sometimes the greatest performance isn't about hitting right notes. Sometimes it's about having courage to stop performing and start protecting people who need it most. That's what Chester proved at the Hollywood Bowl. In a world where too many choose to look away when others are hurt, Chester looked directly at the problem and acted. He showed 20,000 people what real strength looks like, reminding us we have power to make each other safer, if we're brave enough to use it.